feel like there's use and there's abuse, isn't there? That's the thing. Anyone can, do either. You use something on a regular basis, you have it in context, you have a time, but if you can't do without it, then, it becomes open to abuse. And I suppose anything can, whether it be coffee, alcohol, cannabis, opiates, whatever.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Harmonia Podcast. We are joined here today by Dave Barton. He is the founder of, how do I pronounce it? Thermidor? Yep, yep. And co-founder of Lobsterpot Podcast, because that one was a mouthful for me to pronounce.
That's it. Maybe we need to get some different names, but no, that's cool. No, nice to see you. Good to see you, Berta. How you doing?
I'm all right. Thank you very much. And thank you so much for joining us today. Would you like to do a very quick introduction?
Yeah, of course, sure. So I think you told them my name. So I'm Dave Barton. I'm the co-founder of Thermidor. Thermidor is a content-driven creative agency. We're based here in the UK, but we kind of operate internationally, and we're focused on, well, the global legal cannabis industry, really, and particularly here in the UK, medical cannabis is obviously a big concern here. So we are sort of trying to focus the efforts, the works that we do around sort of medical cannabis here in the UK. And yeah, so I'm a medical cannabis patient myself. Have been for a couple of years now. Um, Generally to sort of treat sort of OCD, anxiety, and things like that. So it's more kind of mental health. But no, it just more and more. The more you talk to people, the more you talk about medical cannabis and find out more about the different ways in which people are using it for therapeutic purposes. The more interesting, and it becomes as a kind of proposition, and it makes me think, well, what are we, a nation of 67 million people, but we've got less than 40,000 patients? I mean, 34,000. Yeah, it's absolutely crackers. So, more work obviously needs to be done to kind of let the rest of the world, or let the rest of the UK know that medical cannabis is legal and can be prescribed. And yeah, I suppose that's something we can all get behind in a way, isn't it? So,
Yeah, no, it's absolutely amazing. And I've watched a few of your podcasts as well, and I think it's amazing the work that you are doing to promote medical cannabis as a viable treatment option for patients. Because prior to, no, no, seriously, it's amazing. Like, obviously, that's why you're here. Actually, while we're on that, because you did mention that you were a patient yourself, and I was just wondering, can you tell me a little bit more about your journey with medical cannabis and what sort of inspired yourself and Jamie to formulate the Lobster Pot podcast?
sure. Well, I guess personally, it was more about, I think I sort of hit 40 and started to sort of see that cannabis was sort of opening up sort of legally across the world, really seeing what's happening in Canada, the US, and other countries. And as a copywriter, as a content creator, it was making me think, well, perhaps there's a new sort of industry opening up, and that was really interesting. And then it was a case of, well, I've always kind of been on SSRIs for, probably the last 20 years or so, or something like that. And as I was kind of looking at, what's available here in medical cannabis, it made me realize, oh, actually, I could probably qualify. And so it was kind of initially out of sort of curiosity to sort of see how, what the process would be like in, I mean, again, it was very straightforward in many respects, but then I do kind of have tried different sort of treatment paths over the years. And so I guess it was a kind of simple sort of tick box exercise for me. Whereas I know that other people who have tried it, who have tried different things, maybe once or something like that before, different treatment paths, then, they haven't been as sort of successful in the same way. But at the same time, it always strikes me that, we hear about, when we talk about medical cannabis, when we go to conferences and we talk to, patients and things like that, and we talk to people operating in the industry, who a lot of them have been, their lives have been sort of transformed by cannabis, either themselves personally or someone they know, a close family member or friend or something like that. And it makes me think, well, there is, therefore there's a need for it. And it just makes me think, one of the things we're trying to do with the Lobster Pot, we try to talk to people from all across the world, doing, working in different parts of the cannabis industry. So obviously we've had you on, we talk to everyone from people in Colombia to Zimbabwe to Thailand, US, Canada. And I think, again, it's good to kind of get the perspectives and see how different countries have, are sort of fighting different battles when it comes to the legalization of both, I guess, medical and recreational cannabis. But here in particular, it feels like in the UK, we have a real opportunity now to really focus on, thinking. I mean, I've been reading about the kind of ADHD medication crisis and things like that, and how cannabis is becoming more and more, actually, more people are looking into that as a result of there being a lack of medication. And the more you read about, something like 1.8 million people in the UK are, you know, dipping into the illicit market to self medicate. There's huge potential there in terms of giving people access to safe, good quality, and medical cannabis. Whether it be flower, whether it be oil, and I think that it's partly educating people. Letting people know that this is a thing, that they can access it, that it's available. It's private. So again, I feel like that's one of the biggest obstacles. And I guess it's that kind of letting people know, giving people the information about how to do that, and then almost kind of, you know, providing them almost with a community that says, actually, yeah, this is a thing, and I think that is almost the biggest part in helping overcome that stigma. And that's kind of my take on
No, 100%. And I actually really love the work that you guys do globally because I think it's one of the things that we really should be highlighting here. I feel, just as a personal medical cannabis patient myself, I often feel that when you are speaking to healthcare professionals, oh, do you know what? Just a general public, not, yeah, just a general public, there is that sort of bias around why was medical cannabis even legalized in the first place. And they struggle to understand that other countries have legalized it and the world hasn't fallen apart. It's not this thing that's going to bring about the end of days. Like, and I think showcasing what is being done globally and how it's actually impacting people there will help a lot with people's mindset here, if that makes any sense.
No, 100%. No, it really, really does. I mean, even looking at the kind of recreational market, I mean, I've been to Canada last year, and you go to Toronto and you see just so many sort of dispensaries, and they're kind of like high end shops, and it's like, well, like you say, the world's not going to end. We can have nice things, and public morality is not going to sort of denigrate before our very eyes just because cannabis is legal and available, you know. But it is about finding ways that, again, it's always struck me as very strange that something that someone can enjoy sort of recreationally on a weekend or a Friday night or whatever, at the same time, that is the same substance essentially as helping people, it's transforming kids' lives with epilepsy and things like that. And you think, well, how can it be the same thing? And I guess maybe that's one of the biggest, again, for me, that's still a big stumbling block in terms of like, how can this be? But then I think it comes back to the idea that all cannabis is therapeutic, you know, whether it be, for relaxation, for enjoyment, or for, managing symptoms of anything, that, from, I guess, it's oncology to kind of, EDS to, whatever condition it might be. And, it's strange. I mean, I've always, people say, yeah, but you're doing it to kind of get high, aren't you? It's like, well, yeah, but that's part of the reason that it makes you feel better. That's the thing. It's having that perspective, particularly when it comes to kind of mental health, and you kind of need almost a moment out of the day to be able to kind of take stock of things and think things through, and get some perspective on some of the challenges, or how you're feeling, and almost take stock of yourself in a way. And talk about mindfulness, talk about all of the different kind of health and wellness kind of buzzwords that seems to be coming up more and more recently. Absolutely. But it's we all need that time, that space, that opportunity to really kind of almost commune with ourselves to understand how we're feeling. And cannabis is a great conduit to that. Absolutely. And I think that.
And you hit the nail on the head there when you said a lot of people always make the assumption that you just want to get high. And I tend to find that very funny when people say that to me. I actually start laughing because I laugh at inappropriate times. Yeah, yeah, of course. Yeah, I'm high all the time, isn't it? But no, the main reason I laugh is because someone like myself, before I started taking medical cannabis, yeah, I was gonna say, so I was on medications such as tramadol, such as gabapentin, such as tenazidine, such as amitriptyline, and these are all drowsy medications that actually make me I would say higher than the medical cannabis itself. I tend to find that people forget there is the CBD element. And if you have a nice balance of that, then it does counteract that high feeling. And you are also supporting your health with one medication rather than at one point I was on 9 different tablets. So I generally just tend to laugh when people are like, oh yeah, but what about getting high? And I'm like, if only you knew how high I was on the NHS medication, you actually wouldn't be asking me that question.
No, absolutely, and I think that's a very valid point. And I think again, it's to do with a lot of the kind of addiction of opioid. I mean, again, I've only sort of seen, I can seen, the danger, not experienced personally and things like that, but in terms of the effects, the impact that that can have, the negative impact, even though it starts off, as I understand, as a sort of positive thing. It's like, wow, all of a sudden I've got my life back, but then you have this real reliance, as I understand it, on the medication itself to the point that it becomes all consuming to be able to, and I've never ever found cannabis to be like that. I mean, I don't know the science of addiction and things like that. It's not something I've kind of explored. I mean, I'm just a copywriter at the end of the day, but at the same time, it's like, I feel like there's use and there's abuse, isn't there? That's the thing. Anyone can, do either. You use something on a regular basis, you have it in context, you have a time, but if you can't do without it, then, it becomes open to abuse. And I suppose anything can, whether it be coffee, alcohol, cannabis, opiates, whatever, everything's kind of open to that. It's about understanding how things, and I guess maybe it's when it comes to sort of medical cannabis, it's understanding how it should be used. And then maybe that's something personally I would like to kind of see more of from, I guess medical professionals who operate in the space. Like, well, how do we use it? What is the what's the recommendation? Should I be using flour? Should it be, or what's the, how does that dovetail with my, do you know what I mean? Yeah, absolutely. And I think that would be useful. And I think again, it's all of those kind of obstacles. And again, I see it as, how do we make the path to, getting people towards medical cannabis, giving them access? How do you make that easier? And I mean, what's your sort of take on that? Because again, if you've got a condition, I feel like it's there's no obstacle as such. But again, there's stigma. There's people that oh, I've got anxiety, but I haven't tried anything for it. Or cannabis, but I haven't. Do you know what I mean? It's like, how do we kind of reduce those barriers? What's your sort of take on that?
So, I mean, I want to touch on one thing that you mentioned earlier, and I feel that it is very important for people to recognize that there's use and there is abuse. And as somebody who does work in the substance misuse sector, I have seen people abuse a variety of different medications from the GP. If you take your medication as prescribed, the likelihood of addiction does reduce. Now, in all cases, we don't know who is predisposition to it. So there always can be cases, but that is with all medication. And just my own personal journey with medications is that I actually had to abuse tramadol and all the other medications I was being prescribed because it would only last in my system for about 40 minutes to an hour. And so I was taking copious amounts of pills in order to just be comfortable enough to lay in bed, not even be able to do anything else. So it's interesting because even with pharmaceutical medications, I'm talking about the conventional medications, we, I guess, as a chronic pain patient, the majority of us do abuse that medication because we do need copious amounts of it, just because of where we're at with our physical health wise. And in terms of what the cannabis industry can sort of improve on, is I agree with you. It is very, very important to have some guidance. I feel that it will make newer people very I suppose, a little less anxious about trialing a new medication. If there are steps, there's some guidance, they know what to expect and they know where to go to should they have an adverse reaction. And so a lot of guidance around this would be really important. And also it would support with integrating into the NHS. Again, doctors want to see guidance as well. With a medication that's unlicensed, they're going to feel very uncomfortable prescribing something that they're not quite sure how to even offer. Oh, what am I trying to say? Oh yeah, that they're not quite familiar with, basically. So yes, guidance is very important, but I also feel that a lot of the times, patients, we sometimes have to put extra work in as well. I find that once we take the medication and we get symptom relief, we're like, okay, that's it, we got symptom relief, and we're happy now. We can do stuff, yay! And it's sort of like, no, you've only got symptom relief, but you haven't actually treated your condition. So the work still needs to go in to treating your condition, because now that you have symptom relief, you're not able to do the relevant stuff that you need to do, like maintain a healthy diet, exercising. I know for me, yoga is a big one. If I don't do yoga, my body complains in the next couple of days. You know all about it. So I feel like introducing a sort of like holistic model would be something that is very important, because it not only supports the patient with their symptoms, but it also supports the patients with looking at their lives as a whole. Because as I'm not sure about you, but as a pain patient, I it impacts all parts of your life, and so you do lose a lot of yourself. And when you finally are back feeling better again, there is that psychological impact where you sit there and you think, oh, if I go out, what if I faint again? Or if I go out, what if this happens or that happens? Because I've got 38 symptoms. So I'm always worried about how it's going to present in public and if I'm actually okay. And working on some of these areas for patients is really, really important, because they have lost a huge chunk of their life. And most.
I understand. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, we've been to, kind of evenings with the MCCS, like the Medical Cannabis Clinician Society, and going to see how, you have very accomplished professionals like, Professor Mike Barnes, and talking to, very qualified doctors. And it's just like the knowledge just isn't there. That's the thing. It's all been one pill, one cure, the curious, even for those who are kind of medical professionals who are curious about it, it's still a very steep learning curve, I guess, to understand about the endocannabinoid system, about how CB receptors work, about terpenes, and it's just a whole new world. And I guess it's so different in a way to what they're almost kind of used to from the kind of pharmaceutical you know perspective. But but again, it kind of goes back to that, plant medicine, and understanding. It becomes a bit more sort of, like you say, folk medicine almost, and it shouldn't necessarily be that. But again, if you kind of look back and look at, I feel like the earth provides. It's very highfalutin. I'm not, it's kind of like the earth provides kind of everything we need, from a kind of plants, animals, all of that, food, medication, material. And it's almost kind of like that mindset shift is kind of sort of moving back towards that and understanding. I think as a society, progresses, and I feel like there's still a very big sort of gap to bridge where it comes to like, well, actually, this is still similar, but it does. But again, it's all about education. It's all about talking about these things. It's all about informing people. And I guess, like you say, as patients have a responsibility, and I feel similar in that if we're working in the industry, as much as being patients, there's always that kind of bone of advocacy you need to have to be able to sort of stand up and say, actually, just consider it as an option, consider it as a viable pathway, and I think that's it's almost getting that message out there, or reiterating that, and breaking out of that. We'll talk about this sort of cannabis bubble, because again, there, like, a lot of great people working in the industry, very knowledgeable, who are very passionate about changing perspectives and changing lives for the better. But it's almost, they've got to stop preaching to the converted, because we all believe it, we all know it. We've got to kind of get the rest of what is it, 0.006% of the UK are medical cannabis patients. That's absolutely nothing. We need the rest to kind of understand that, and almost, if you can get communicate the benefits in some way nationally to that 1.8 million people who are self-medicating by the illicit market, is that in itself would be a huge boost, to both people and for the industry, the clinics as a whole. So it's like, where does that begin and end? How do we continue to perpetuate that? And I feel like that's the big question, and that's the kind of shared sort of responsibility, as I see it, I guess.
I kind of feel like from a medical community, I feel like a lot of no, I'm just gonna, yeah, okay. So I've spoken to a good few people. I speak to a lot of patients on a regular basis. And one of the things that they often fear is they think that we are trying to say to them, don't use your normal GP, don't use any healthcare system, just come to us and get medical cannabis. And I always explain to them that that's not actually the message that we want to take across. The message we want to take across is if you are struggling with other medications, there is another viable option here for you. That's it. If you're doing well with your medication, then that's grand. Like you're living your life, you're doing well. I'm happy. That's all I want for you. But if you're not, then I wouldn't want you to suffer the way I suffered. So here is another option. Because for some people, I mean, I'll give you an example. I spoke to a woman once on the phone, and we must have spent about 2 hours, and she was in tears and practically inconsolable because she had a lot of complex physical health needs as well, and none of the medication was working for a pretty similar situation to mine. And so she reached out to me, in order to find out about medical cannabis. So I gave her all this information and everything, and she said, okay, she's going to run it by her consultant. I have no idea what her consultant said to her, but all of a sudden I became the enemy, that I was going to impact her physical health, and that if she joined, like if she started taking a medical cannabis prescription, they would end all the medication that she's taking abruptly. And I just thought, wow, are you kidding me right now? And it wasn't even their response, it was her response that shocked me the most, because I thought, you spent 2 hours on the phone crying to me, and now all of a sudden I'm the enemy. I don't ever want a patient to go to their GP or their consultant and continue to suffer and be in pain, and experience a lot of other symptoms as well because their consultant was ignorant. So I feel like challenging a lot of the current medical, I suppose prescribers, to be fair, another key area that we need to focus on.
Absolutely, but again, we have, I guess most of us are kind of accustomed going to the GP, the general practitioner. But the reality of medicine is that it's there are specialists, there are people, there is a kind of basic training, I guess. I mean, not a doctor, so I don't really know how it all works. But you have specialists, you have so why shouldn't there be plant medicine specialists within that mix? It simply comes down to stigma. I really do think that. I really think that.
No, 100%. And but yeah, so just like one final thing that I just want to run by you is, if you had to think about, I suppose, the top three things that not only the industry but us patients need to do to sort of promote medical cannabis as a viable treatment option, what would you say those would be? Like, what was advice would you give?
I think there's a real need for everybody, regardless of their, where they're working or who they're working for. If you are working within the industry, then everybody kind of needs to get behind this one idea that, medical cannabis is, it's available. And I think, again, that's almost as much as we can almost say publicly, if we were to kind of create a kind of advertising, that's it's almost like it's available. We just need to kind of tell people. That's the one thing. I think secondly, there's almost that there are those kind of obstacles in the way. There's the kind of, we need to be able to get GPs to prescribe it. Absolutely, that has to happen. I really think that. I think it's almost like there are so many different aspects to that need to kind of fall into place. But there needs to be a kind of you know I guess volume movement of people. I really do think that if enough people come together, enough raise awareness, then other people will start to kind of inquire, will start to ask questions, and that's what's going to kind of drive momentum. I mean, I've sort of said it before on I've sort of written stuff on LinkedIn, but what always strikes me is that like this whole post office debacle. There's almost like it's been going on for 25 years. The whole thing's happening in the UK around. There was a fault with the software for post office. People got in trouble. Livelihoods ruined. It was all because of a software fault. Nothing was actually done about that until at Christmas they showed some crappy ITV drama version of it, and it's like all of a sudden that kind of catalyzes action. It's almost like, does cannabis need its medical cannabis need that kind of moment to kind of just showcase? it's as ludicrous as something like that might be. All the kind of recent kind of things like the documentaries that they have on the BBC around medical cannabis and how it's changing lives. You know, people are just like, wow, that's amazing, but it doesn't seem to catalyze anyone. It doesn't have that momentum. It's almost like the ways in which people will kind of accept information is not necessarily just by telling them the facts. There is that emotive pull as well. And the patient stories themselves are very, like your own story. They're very. It feels, I'm not say extreme, but they're, well, actually, why not? But again, for someone like myself, I don't feel like my symptoms are kind of extreme, but it does do me good. And I think more people need to kind of relate to others who are not necessarily experiencing the kind of the worst symptoms possible and are using it for that. And I guess that's part of that normalization process. So I think it's almost like a perfect storm of things that will just kind of keep turning in a sort of tornado until eventually things will settle. But again, what's happening inside the eye of the storm, we kind of need to be a part of and keep telling people that actually, yes, this is a thing. Yes, it's for you. Yes, it could actually really work for you. And you know, I think that's. I don't know if that answers the question, but it's the kind of thing I wanted to put out there. But no, I just think it's at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, it's about ending stigma and just telling people this is available, getting people to request it, or finding leading them to the path of access, and saying proving that it's not big and scary, and actually it could do a lot of positive, create a lot of positive change. So yeah.
Yeah, amazing. No, thank you, Dave. That's amazing. So thank you so much for coming on today. And for anybody who's interested in any of the work that Dave does, all of the links will be below in the description. And once again, everyone, thank you so much for joining us here today. And we look forward to seeing you next week, where we will be speaking about advancements in cannabis-based medical products. Bye, everyone. Bye, Dave.
All the best. Thank you. Bye, guys.